You think you can just walk in here and walk out clean?" Curtis Dalton sneered, his smirk curling like a blade. The store fell silent, every eye on Naomi as the police closed in, hands ready for the cuffs. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the cameras above their heads had caught every second, and the truth was about to burn his empire to the ground. The mirrored glass doors of Maison Lure whispered open with a soft whoosh, the kind of expensive hush that signaled wealth even before you stepped inside. It smelled faintly of white gardenias and something else money, the kind of place where the price tags were hidden deep in folds, where sales associates spoke in voices soft enough to make you lean in, just so they could watch your reaction when they told you how much something cost. Naomi Brooks stepped in, holding her handbag close, not because she feared anyone here, but because she had learned long ago how easy it was for a glance to become an accusation. At 34, Naomi was a quiet storm of grace and resolve, smooth, dark skin, hair in a tight bun, tailored camel coat cinched at the waist. She wasn't here for herself. She was here for her mother. Her mother's birthday was in 3 days, and Naomi had promised to buy her a silk scarf from Maison Lure, the kind her mom would never dare to buy on her own. A scarf in deep emerald green, her mother's favorite color. The store was pristine in a way that made you hyper-aware of yourself. Glossy marble floors, gold-accented display cases, mannequins draped in gowns worth more than some people's cars. Naomi's heels clicked softly as she walked toward the accessories section. A sales associate, a young white woman with hair so straight it could slice paper, watched Naomi from the moment she entered. Her gaze wasn't casual. It was calculating, tracking every step like Naomi's presence required inventory. Naomi ignored it. Years of being the only black woman in corporate meetings had taught her the art of pretending not to notice when she was being dissected. "Excuse me," Naomi said gently as she approached the scarf display. "Do you have this in emerald green?" The associate's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Those are premium items. Are you sure you're in the right section?" Naomi blinked. "Yes, I'm sure." Without a word, the associate moved away to check in the back. Naomi could feel her pulse rise. She knew that tone-sharp sugar, masking suspicion. She glanced around, taking in the other shoppers. An older white couple sipping complimentary champagne. A young blonde in a tennis skirt trying on handbags. A suited man running his fingers over silk ties. None of them seemed to be under watch. When the associate returned, she was accompanied by another employee, he a man this time, tall in a fitted blazer, his expression neutral, but his eyes heavy with something Naomi recognized instantly. Judgment. "I'm going to need to check your bag before we proceed," he said, voice low but carrying enough weight to turn nearby heads. Naomi froze. "Excuse me?" "It's just store policy." "When?" he began. "When what?" Her voice was calm, but there was steel under it. He hesitated. "When there's a security concern." "I walked in here less than 3 minutes ago," Naomi said. "I asked about a scarf. That's the extent of my criminal activity." The young associate shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The man store manager, Naomi guessed, tilted his head as if giving her one last chance to submit quietly. "I'm not showing you my bag," Naomi said, adjusting her coat. "If you think I've done something wrong, you can review your cameras." His eyes narrowed. "Fine, I'll do you one better." He turned slightly and made a small hand motion toward the security podium. 2 uniformed police officers entered the store minutes later, the heavy thump of their boots on marble slicing through the hushed air. The store seemed to contract. Conversations stopped. Eyes shifted. The air became thick with that blend of curiosity and unease that always blooms around confrontation. Naomi stood her ground as one officer, a sandy-haired man with a square jaw, approached her. "Ma'am, we got a call about a shoplifting incident." Her mouth went dry. "A shoplifting incident? From who?" The store manager stepped forward. "From me. She's been acting suspicious, moving between displays, and we have reason to believe she concealed an item in her bag." "That's a lie," Naomi said, her voice breaking slightly, not from guilt, but from the sharp humiliation flooding her chest. She glanced around. Every shopper in the store was watching now. The blonde with the handbag tilted her head, pity flickering in her eyes. An older man pulled out his phone, not to help, Naomi suspected, but to record. "Ma'am, can we look inside your bag?" The officer asked again, this time with the kind of voice meant to sound patient, but loaded with authority. Naomi's heartbeat was a war drum. She thought of her mother, of the birthday surprise she'd planned, of every time in her life she'd had to weigh dignity against safety. "Open it, Naomi," a voice inside her whispered. "Just open it and walk away." But another voice, louder, said, "If you give them this, they'll think they can take anything." She took a slow breath. "Am I under arrest?" The officer's jaw tightened. "Not yet." "Then no," she said. "You do not have my consent to search my bag." That was all it took. The shift was instant. The officer glanced at his partner, a younger Latina woman, and they moved closer. The store manager's lips twitched in something almost like satisfaction. "Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we'll have to detain you," the male officer said. Naomi's voice rose, not in a scream, but in a clarity that cut through the room. "You're humiliating me in front of everyone over a lie. I walked in here to buy a gift for my mother. That's my crime." The manager crossed his arms. "You can explain that downtown." A murmur rippled through the store. Someone whispered, "This is disgusting." Another voice, quieter, said, "She probably did something." The Latina officer stepped forward, cuffs in hand. Naomi felt the weight of every gaze on her, the heat of shame burning into her spine. The marble floor seemed to tilt beneath her. "Turn around," the officer said softly. Naomi's hands shook as she complied. The cold metal closed around her wrists, the click echoing like a verdict. She was walked toward the doors, flanked by uniforms, the store manager's smirk a shadow in her peripheral vision. Outside, the late afternoon sun was blinding. The sound of the street honking cars, chatter, distant sirens rushed in, but Naomi could only hear her own pulse. Someone shouted from across the street, "What's going on?" Cameras were raised, voices overlapping, the chaos of public spectacle. Naomi kept her head high as she was guided into the back of the patrol car. She refused to give the onlookers the satisfaction of seeing her break. Inside the cruiser, the male officer spoke into his radio, his words a blur. Naomi stared at the metal grate in front of her, her reflection fractured into sharp, distorted pieces. She didn't know it yet, but in less than 48 hours, those same security cameras the store manager had mentioned would tell a very different story, one that would not only clear her name, but ignite something far larger than she could imagine. And in that moment, sitting cuffed in the back of a police car for the crime of shopping while black, Naomi made a silent vow, "This will not end here." The holding cell smelled faintly of bleach and something older, something you couldn't scrub away. Naomi sat on the metal bench, hands resting on her knees, cuffs finally removed, but wrists still carrying the faint bite of steel. The cell wasn't full, just 3 others inside. A man in his 60s hunched in the corner, staring at the floor. A teenage boy with wild, anxious eyes sat tapping his foot in a rapid rhythm. And a middle-aged woman, her hair tangled and her coat frayed, muttered softly to herself about the lies they tell. Naomi wasn't supposed to be here. That truth pressed against her chest with a heaviness she couldn't push away. She had done nothing but walk into a store. And yet here she was, waiting for her name to be processed through a system that had never been designed to believe her innocence. The sound of keys rattling broke her thoughts. A uniformed officer appeared at the bars. Not the sandy-haired one from the store. This one was older, with a tired face and eyes that gave away no particular warmth. "Naomi Brooks," he said. She stood slowly. "You're being processed now," he said, motioning for her to follow. The booking room was colder than the cell, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. She was guided to a counter where a young clerk sat typing into a computer. "Empty your pockets," the clerk said without looking up. I don't. The older officer cut her off. Pockets. Naomi emptied them. Phone, keys, a lip balm, a folded receipt for groceries. The clerk took them, logging each item into a plastic evidence bag, as though they were dangerous. Step over here, the officer said, guiding her to the side for photographs. The camera clicked once, twice front profile, side profile. Naomi kept her chin up, though her stomach churned at the thought of her image now existing in some police database, tagged with a word she had never earned, suspect. Fingerprints, the clerk called. She was guided to another station where a younger officer, a black man, maybe late 20s, stood by the fingerprint scanner. He didn't meet her eyes at first, focusing on the machine, his hands steady. Place your right hand here, he said quietly. She did. His gloved hands guided hers gently, rolling each finger over the scanner. There was something in the way he moved, careful, almost apologetic, that made Naomi glance at him. He met her gaze briefly, and in that flicker of a moment, she thought she saw it. Recognition, not of her face, but of the situation. When they were done, he said softly, "You didn't take anything, did you?" Naomi swallowed. "No, I didn't." He nodded once, eyes darting to the older officer, before he stepped back. "Sit tight," he said, voice barely above a whisper. She was led to a bench in the processing area to wait. The minutes dragged, each one punctuated by the sound of printers spitting out forms and the low murmur of officers trading case notes. Finally, the sandy-haired officer from the store, Officer Kent, walked in, speaking to the store manager on his cell phone. Naomi caught only fragments. "Yeah, she's here now." "Well, if you don't have the footage ready, we'll keep her until—" Her pulse quickened. Footage. So there was security video. Of course there was. Every inch of that store was watched. Kent hung up, then glanced at her. "You're free to make one phone call." Naomi didn't hesitate. "I want to call my lawyer." His jaw tightened. "You have a lawyer?" "Yes." She had one on retainer, not because she was wealthy, but because life had taught her it was safer that way. He handed her the desk phone. Naomi dialed quickly, her fingers shaking. When her lawyer, David Merritt, picked up, she spoke fast, explaining everything: the store, the accusation, the arrest. "Don't say another word to them," David said. "I'm on my way." When she hung up, Officer Kent smirked faintly. "Lawyer's not going to change the fact you were acting suspicious." Naomi turned toward him, her voice low and sharp. "You're making a career out of suspicion. But suspicion isn't evidence." He didn't reply. 20 minutes later, David Merritt strode in. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and a suit that said, "I will dismantle your case before lunch," he went directly to the desk officer. "My client is being released immediately," David said, sliding paperwork across the counter. "You have no probable cause. You have no stolen merchandise. And unless you want to be facing a wrongful arrest lawsuit before the week's end, you'll let her walk out right now." The desk officer frowned but said nothing, reviewing the forms. Naomi caught the younger black officer glancing at her again, something unspoken in his eyes. Within minutes, she was signing release paperwork. Her belongings were returned in a clear plastic bag. As she stepped toward the exit with David, the younger officer passed by, leaning slightly toward her without stopping. "Check the internet tomorrow," he murmured. Naomi's brow furrowed, but before she could ask, he was gone. Outside, the night air was cold, the streetlights casting long shadows. David walked beside her, his tone brisk but concerned. "I'll be filing immediately. This isn't just wrongful arrest, it's racial profiling, and I suspect that footage will back us up. I'll be demanding it first thing tomorrow." They reached his car. Naomi slid into the passenger seat, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. "They treated me like I was a criminal before I even spoke," she said softly. David started the engine. "That's because they already decided you were." By the next morning, Naomi's name was already circulating. Small local blogs had picked up the story from bystanders' phone videos posted online. One clip showed her being led out of the store in cuffs, chin high despite the glares and whispers. Some comments were supportive. "This is disgusting." She didn't even look guilty. Others dripped with venom. Don't shoplift and you won't get arrested. Simple. Naomi sat at her kitchen table, phone buzzing nonstop. Her mother called, voice shaking, asking if she was okay. Her best friend Kaisha texted, "Girl, you're trending in the city hashtag." Her lawyer called mid-morning. "The store's not handing over the footage voluntarily," David said. "But that might not matter." "What do you mean?" There was a pause. "Someone sent me an anonymous link this morning." "Naomi, I think this is the security footage." Her stomach flipped. And it shows exactly what you said. You walked in, asked about a scarf, and never touched a single product except the one you pointed to. It also shows the manager shadowing you from the moment you entered." Naomi's throat tightened. "Who sent it?" "No idea, but it's time to decide, do we keep this quiet for court, or do we make it public?" Naomi thought of the younger officer's words, "Check the internet tomorrow." "Send it to me," she said. Minutes later, the file was on her laptop. She pressed play, watching herself walk into Maison Lure. The footage was clear, her movements calm, deliberate, unthreatening. The manager appeared in frame, watching her from behind a display, speaking into an earpiece. The video followed her to the scarf section, captured her brief conversation with the sales associate, and then, without her touching anything, cut to the moment the manager walked to the security podium and made the call. By the time it ended, Naomi's hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sharp electric spark of something she hadn't felt in 24 hours. Power. Naomi watched the video 3 times. The first time, her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear her own thoughts. The second time, her mind was racing ahead, calculating outcomes. The third time, she sat still, eyes locked on the moment the store manager picked up the phone. It was all there, the truth in crisp, high-definition detail. She hadn't stolen a thing. She hadn't even touched anything except the scarf she'd pointed at. The video captured exactly what she'd told Officer Kent and her lawyer. Her walking in, being shadowed, being treated like a suspect, before she'd even spoken a full sentence. She called David. "If we release this publicly, what happens?" He hesitated. "If you go public now, it will definitely pressure them corporate, the police, but it could also complicate the legal process. They'll fight harder. They might accuse you of manipulating the court of public opinion." Naomi stared at the paused frame on her laptop, the manager's face, smug as he made the call. "David, they humiliated me in front of an entire store. The court of public opinion is already against me, and I didn't ask for it. This is my only defense they can't twist." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." It started small. Naomi uploaded the footage to her private cloud, then sent the link to Kaisha with a single message. "Post this everywhere." Kaisha didn't hesitate. She had a following, mostly lifestyle and activism content, and within minutes of posting, the views were climbing. By noon, the video was on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. Captions ranged from "racial profiling in plain sight." "She was arrested for existing while black." "Maison Lure caught lying, here's the proof." "Shoplifting?" "Watch and decide for yourself." The hashtags multiplied. Hashtag justice for Naomi, hashtag boycott Maison Lure, hashtag shopping while black. Naomi's phone lit up non-stop texts from strangers thanking her for speaking out. DMs from reporters asking for interviews, emails from civil rights groups offering support. By 3 p.m., a clip from the footage had been played on a local news segment. The anchor's voice was calm, almost clinical, but the subtext was clear. This looks bad for the store. In the corner office of Maison Lure's downtown flagship, store manager Curtis Dalton sat with his arms folded, watching the same footage on a company-issued laptop. "This is out of context," he said, voice tight. Across the desk, Regional Director Angela Ross, sharp navy suit, expression like stone, didn't blink. "Curtis, this shows you calling the police on a customer who touched nothing but a display scarf. Explain to me how context changes that." He stopped, realizing how hollow it sounded. She was acting suspicious, looking around too much. Angela closed a laptop. That's your explanation? Because it's not going to hold up. Corporate has been fielding calls all morning. The CEO's office is involved now. Curtis shifted in his chair. What do you want me to do? What you should have done yesterday, apologize immediately, and pray it's enough to stop this from becoming a national story. By that evening, it was too late to contain. The video had gone viral, crossing from local activism circles into national conversation. Large accounts were posting it with captions like, "If you ever wondered what racial profiling looks like in real time, this is it." Civil rights attorneys weighed in publicly, some tagging Maison-Lour's corporate account directly. Celebrities retweeted it, adding, "This is unacceptable. Do better." Even people who'd never heard of the store before were declaring they'd never shop there. Naomi sat in her apartment, phone in hand, watching the chaos unfold. Kaisha sat beside her, laptop open, grinning in disbelief. "You realize you just started a boycott, right?" Kaisha said. "I didn't start anything," Naomi said softly. "They did." But the backlash didn't stop with the store. The police department began receiving calls and emails demanding accountability. Why had the officers cuffed and detained Naomi without evidence? Why had they taken the manager's word at face value? Inside the precinct, the younger black officer Lewis kept his head down, but the corner of his mouth twitched when he overheard two colleagues grumbling about this mess with the boutique lady. Lewis knew the video would change things. He also knew it was risky. Leaking security footage was a fireable offense. Worse, it could be criminal. But he had watched too many people walk through that booking room knowing they didn't belong there. When he saw Naomi sitting on that bench, silent but unbroken, he decided he'd take the risk. The next morning, Naomi woke to find the hashtag boycott Maison-Lour trending at number 2 nationally. Her voicemail was full. Journalists from national outlets wanted her story. Activists wanted to feature her in online panels. Strangers were Venmoing her small amounts with messages like, "For your legal fight." Her mother called again, this time with a voice steadier than before. "Baby, I saw the video. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." Naomi smiled faintly. "Thanks, Mom, but this is bigger than me now." And it was. That afternoon, a statement from Maison-Lour's corporate office appeared online. "We take these allegations seriously. We are reviewing the incident and will take appropriate action to ensure all customers are treated with dignity and respect." The statement was met with immediate backlash. Comments poured in. "Not good enough. Fire the manager. Release your internal security footage." Naomi read it and shook her head. "They're buying time," she told Kaisha. "They're hoping the noise dies down." Kaisha leaned forward. "Then don't let it. Do an interview. Tell your story in your own words before they try to twist it." That evening, Naomi sat across from a local news anchor in the small, warmly lit studio. She wore the same camel coat she'd had on in the store, her hair in the same bun deliberately, a visual reminder of the woman in the footage. The interview began with a simple question. What happened that day? Naomi told the story, plainly walking into the store, asking about the scarf, the manager's immediate suspicion, the refusal to let them search her bag without cause, and the humiliation of being led out in cuffs. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't embellish. She let the facts and the footage speak for themselves. When the interview aired, clips spread across social media within hours. Comments poured in, not just about Naomi's experience, but from others sharing similar stories. Being followed in stores, asked for receipts, accused without cause. It was no longer just about Naomi. It had become a movement. The next morning, a new headline appeared. Maison-Lour shuts down flagship store for a security review. Naomi read it twice. "Security review," she said out loud. "That's corporate speak for we're trying to get rid of someone quietly," David called minutes later. "They're panicking. I've been contacted by their legal team. They're offering a private settlement in exchange for you dropping any public claims." "Are they firing the manager?" "They wouldn't say." "Then the answer's no," Naomi said. There was a pause. Naomi, if you keep pushing, this is going to get uglier. They'll dig into your past, try to find anything to discredit you. She took a deep breath. Let them try. I'm not negotiating in private when they humiliated me in public. That night, Naomi sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through messages. Among them was one from an unfamiliar address. I work at Maison Lure Corporate. You need to see what's in our internal investigation report. Attached was a file. Naomi hesitated, then opened it. Her breath caught. It was an internal email thread between Angela Ross, the regional director, and several corporate executives. In it, Angela confirmed the security footage proved Naomi had done nothing wrong. One executive wrote, "Curtis has a history of guest profiling. This is the third complaint in 6 months." Another responded, "We can't fire him without making ourselves look liable. Stall and hope the social media noise dies down." Naomi leaned back, staring at the screen. The footage had lit the spark. This was gasoline. And for the first time since the marble floors of Maison Lure closed behind her, Naomi allowed herself a small, fierce smile. Naomi didn't sleep. The corporate emails sat open on her laptop, the glow of the screen painting her apartment in shades of blue and white. She read them again and again, the words pressing deeper into her chest each time. Curtis has a history of guest profiling. This is the third complaint in 6 months. Stall and hope the social media noise dies down. She thought about every person who had sent her messages in the past 2 days, sharing their own stories of being followed in stores or accused without cause. Some had cried while typing. Others were angry, demanding action. The common thread was exhaustion from carrying the weight of suspicion simply for existing in a black body. And now here was proof that Maison Lure knew Curtis was a problem, knew he had done this before, and chose to protect him anyway. Naomi's phone buzzed. "Kaisha." "You're still up?" Kaisha asked, voice thick with sleep. "Couldn't. Talk to me." Naomi hesitated, then forwarded the email thread. A minute later, Kaisha hissed sharply into the phone. "They knew? Oh, this is it. You drop this, and they'll have no place to hide. David will say to hold it," Naomi said. "He'll want to use it in court," Kaisha snorted. "Court is months away. Social media is now. You release that, and you're not just defending yourself, you're making it impossible for them to bury this." By morning, Naomi's decision was made. She called David first, knowing he'd be furious. "This is explosive," he said after she explained. "But if you post it, they'll claim you obtained it illegally. It could hurt your case." Naomi's voice was steady. "If I keep it to myself, they'll keep Curtis and keep profiling other people. I can't let that happen." David exhaled heavily. "Then at least protect yourself. Don't post it directly. Leak it." Naomi hung up, opened her email, and sent the file to a journalist she trusted, a black woman from a national outlet who had covered racial discrimination cases before. She didn't sign her name. The subject line read, "Inside Maison Lure, What They Knew." The article hit less than 24 hours later. The headline screamed across screens. "Leaked emails show Maison Lure knew of racial profiling, failed to act." The body of the piece laid it all out. The 3 previous complaints against Curtis Dalton, the internal acknowledgement of his guest profiling, and the deliberate corporate decision to keep him in place. The journalist wove Naomi's story into a broader pattern, connecting it to other high-profile incidents of racial bias in retail. Within hours, the story was trending. News stations replayed the security footage side by side with screenshots of the damning emails. Activists called for Curtis's immediate firing. Some went further, demanding the resignation of the executives who had signed off on protecting him. By noon, the first protest formed outside the Maison Lure flagship store. Naomi saw it on a live stream. Dozens of people, holding signs that read, "Dignity over dollars," "No more shopping while black," and "Fire Curtis Dalton." Cars passing by honked in support. The store's glass doors stayed locked, the sales floor inside nearly empty. 2 security guards stood at the entrance, their faces tense. Kaisha showed up at Naomi's apartment, dropping 2 coffees on the table. "They're chanting your name out there. You're basically the face of this now." "I didn't ask to be," Naomi said quietly. "You didn't have to. They'd put you there the second they put those cuffs on you." Inside corporate headquarters, chaos reigned. The PR department's phones rang nonstop. Emails from angry customers flooded in. One luxury fashion blogger announced she was cutting ties with the brand entirely, and within hours several influencers followed suit. Angela Ross, the regional director, paced outside the CEO's office waiting to be called in. She had seen the emails in the article. She knew exactly who had sent them, and it wasn't someone inside her building. When she was finally ushered in, the CEO's expression was thunderous. "Do you realize the legal exposure we have right now? If one more document leaks—" "It wasn't from my end," Angela said quickly. "And we can still what?" The CEO slammed a printout of the article on the desk. "Dalton is done. I want him gone today." Angela blinked. "That's not going to stop this. The narrative is already bigger than him." The CEO's jaw tightened. "Then find a way to kill it." Curtis Dalton received the call while standing in the back office of the store. His face flushed as he listened. "You can't fire me," he snapped. "This is politics. I was protecting the store." On the other end, Angela's voice was clipped. "You were profiling customers, and you just cost us millions in brand damage. You're done, Curtis. Leave your keys at the desk." He hung up, breathing hard. Outside the office window, he could see the protesters chanting, holding signs, phones up, filming everything. He grabbed his coat, shoved it on, and slipped out the side door, head down. But someone recognized him. "That's him," a voice shouted. Phones swung toward him. People surged forward, chanting louder. "Shame! Shame! Shame!" Curtis pushed through, but the footage of his red-faced exit could be on every social media platform by evening. Naomi watched that clip on her phone, feeling a complicated rush. Satisfaction, yes, but also the weight of knowing this wasn't just about one man's downfall. The system that kept him in place was still standing. The next morning, Maison Lure released a second statement. "The company has terminated store manager Curtis Dalton, effective immediately. We are conducting a full review of our customer service policies and employee training procedures. We apologize to Ms. Naomi Brooks and to our community." But the apology rang hollow. Comments poured in. Too late. "You only acted because you got caught. Fire the execs who protected him," David called Naomi an hour later. "They're offering a formal settlement again, this time with a public apology and a significant payout." "Significant how?" "Enough to make you comfortable for a while." Naomi stared out her window, watching the street below. "If I take it, do I have to stop speaking about this?" "Yes," David said. "They'll require a non-disclosure agreement." She didn't even need to think. "Then no." David was silent for a moment. "You're making enemies in powerful places." Naomi's voice was steady. "I already had them. The difference is now everyone can see them." The protests continued for days. What began as a small group outside one store spread to other cities where Maison Lure had locations. Social media accounts sprang up dedicated to documenting the boycott. Naomi began receiving invitations to speak not just to news outlets, but at community events and advocacy panels. She wasn't an activist by trade, but she understood something now. She had a platform, and platforms were meant to be used. Kaisha drove her to her first panel, a gathering of local business owners discussing racial equity in retail. Naomi walked onto the stage, scanning the audience faces, young and old, black, white, and everything in between. When she spoke, she didn't just tell her story. She spoke about the other messages she'd received, the countless people who had been made to feel unwelcome in spaces where they were spending their money. She challenged business owners to examine their training, their biases, and the systems that allowed profiling to continue unchecked. The applause at the end was long sustained. That night, as Naomi scrolled through her phone, she saw a new development. Someone had posted a screenshot of another leaked Internal memo, this one discussing strategies to monitor high-risk customers, with vague language that could easily be read as targeting people of color. The post was blowing up, and the comments were furious. Naomi sat back, the weight of the last few days pressing down on her. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time, she felt the momentum was on her side. She thought of the store's marble floors, the smell of gardenias, the smirk on Curtis Dalton's face. She thought of the cuffs, the flashing cameras, the voices in the crowd. And she thought of every person watching this unfold who had been told, in big ways or small, that they didn't belong. Her jaw tightened. We belong everywhere. And she wasn't going to stop until everyone knew it. Naomi woke to the sound of her phone vibrating against the knit-stand. It was barely 6 a.m., and the light filtering through her blinds was still gray with early morning. She gradually reached for the phone, expecting Kaisha or David. It wasn't either of them. It was a number she didn't recognize, with no caller ID. She let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. The voice was male, low, and deliberate. You think you're winning, Miss Brooks, but people are looking into your past now. You won't like what they find. The message ended with a click. Naomi sat upright, heart pounding. She knew intimidation when she heard it. The timing was no accident after 3 days of protests, a viral boycott, and Curtis Dalton's public firing. The people who'd been protecting him were feeling the heat. And now they were pushing back. Later that morning, Kaisha arrived with coffee and her usual storm of energy, but Naomi stopped her at the door. Listen to this. She replayed the voicemail. Keisha's eyes narrowed. That's a threat. I know. You need to tell David? Naomi nodded. Already did. He's coming over. By mid-morning, David was sitting at her kitchen table, phone in hand, frowning as he replayed the message. This is classic corporate damage control, he said. When they can't shut you up, they try to discredit you or scare you into silence. Naomi crossed her arms. What are they going to find? I don't have anything to hide. David glanced at her. It doesn't matter if you've done nothing. They'll twist anything. Old tweets, a parking ticket, a disagreement at work, whatever they can spin into a narrative that you're angry, unstable, or dishonest. Kaisha shook her head. So basically, they're about to gaslight the whole country. David leaned forward. I want you to expect smear pieces in the next few days. Anonymous sources, vague accusations. When that happens, we respond immediately, facts, receipts, no emotion. Don't let them bait you into a public fight that makes you look reckless. Naomi exhaled slowly. So we prepare for war. War came faster than expected. 2 days later, a local business gossip blog ran a headline. Mason Lure accuser faced conflict at former job, sources say. The article cited unnamed co-workers claiming Naomi had been difficult and overly sensitive to perceived slights. It was thin, vague, and clearly meant to cast doubt without making any concrete claims. But the comments section was brutal. Here we go again, playing the victim. She probably just wants a payout. Why are we canceling a store over someone with a history of trouble? Naomi stared at the screen, hands trembling, not from guilt, but from the sharp sting of being reduced to a stereotype in real time. Kaisha slammed her laptop shut. We're not letting this slide. You need to respond. David on speakerphone was firm. Not to them. We go to a bigger outlet. One that will fact-check every word and expose this for what it is. Retaliation. Meanwhile, the police department was running its own quiet damage control. Officer Kent, the sandy-haired officer who had cuffed Naomi, sat in a cramped office across from the precinct's internal affairs investigator. You followed protocol? The investigator asked. Kent nodded. We had a credible report from the store manager. She refused a bag search which gave us reason to detain. The investigator's eyes were unreadable. You're aware the security footage shows no theft. That's irrelevant to the moment of detainment. We can't see the future. Kent leaned back, confident. He didn't believe Naomi could touch him legally, and in truth, holding police accountable in these cases was notoriously difficult. But outside the precinct, the court of public opinion was turning. Civil rights groups were now openly calling for an independent review of the arrest, noting the disproportionate treatment Naomi received compared to white customers accused of similar offenses. Naomi's allies were growing. On Friday, she received a call from Councilwoman Renee Harris, a respected black politician known for her sharp questioning and refusal to bow to corporate pressure. "Ms. Brooks," Harris said warmly, "I've been following your case closely. I believe what happened to you is part of a much larger problem in this city. I'd like you to speak at the upcoming public forum on racial equity in policing and business practices." Naomi hesitated. "I'm not a public speaker." Harris chuckled softly. "You're already speaking, whether you realize it or not. People are listening. And if you show up, we can use your story to push for actual policy change." Naomi glanced at Kaisha, who mouthed, "Do it." She took a breath. "All right. I'll be there." The forum was held in a large auditorium at City Hall, packed with reporters, activists, business owners, and residents. Naomi sat at the long table alongside other panelists, a civil rights attorney, a professor of sociology, and a small business owner who had implemented anti-bias training for his staff. When it was Naomi's turn to speak, she told her story again, but this time she framed it in the context of systemic patterns. "This isn't just about me walking into a store and being accused of theft. It's about every time someone who looks like me has been told, directly or indirectly, 'You don't belong here.' It's about the fact that the store had 3 previous complaints about that manager and kept him anyway. And it's about the police arriving and assuming the manager's word was fact, without even checking the footage first." Her voice was calm but unwavering. The room was silent, except for the sound of her words landing. Councilwoman Harris leaned into her mic. "Ms. Brooks, if you could see one change come from this, what would it be?" Naomi didn't hesitate. Transparency. If a store has repeated discrimination complaints, that should be public record. If police arrest someone without evidence, there should be accountability, real accountability, not just a note in a file. The applause was loud and sustained. Cameras flashed. Naomi felt, for the first time, that her fight was bigger than surviving this moment. It was about shifting the ground beneath it. That night, back at her apartment, Naomi received an email from an unknown address. The subject line was, "You should see this." Attached was a short video clip grainy, like it had been recorded on a phone aimed at a computer screen. It showed the Maison Lure security office on the day of her arrest. Curtis Dalton stood with a security staff member, reviewing live feeds. At one point, Curtis pointed at Naomi on the screen and smirked. Then he said something that made Naomi's blood run cold. "Watch this, she's going to make this easy." They always do. The clip ended there. Naomi stared at her screen, the weight of those words pressing into her chest. This wasn't just profiling. This was premeditated humiliation. She forwarded the video to David with a single line. "We're going nuclear." Naomi sat at her kitchen table, the laptop open, the grainy clip playing on a loop. "Watch this, she's going to make this easy." They always do. The words dripped with contempt, an arrogance that made the hair on her arms stand up. Curtis Dalton hadn't been reacting to suspicion in the moment. He had been waiting for it, relishing it, confident he could turn her into a spectacle without consequence. She didn't need David to tell her this was dynamite. But she called him anyway. When he answered, his tone was sharp. "I just saw your email." "Where did this come from?" "I don't know," Naomi admitted. "Anonymous. Looks like someone filmed the security monitor in the control room." David exhaled heavily. "If this is legit, and it looks like it is, it's not just evidence of bias, it's intent. It proves he targeted you. And it's not just him," Naomi said. "That security guard didn't stop him. The system around him let it happen." David hesitated. "If we release this, Naomi, they'll be out for blood. Corporate, the police both. Are you ready for that?" Naomi looked at the paused frame, Curtis's smirk frozen mid-breath. "They started this war. I'm just making sure everyone sees who they are. They decided to go big. Not a quiet leak. Not a buried link in a tweet. A full press release video, transcript, and Naomi's own statement sent directly to major news outlets, posted to every social media platform she could access. Keisha sat beside her as they hit publish at exactly 10 a.m. The video was under 30 seconds, but it didn't need to be longer. Curtis's voice did the work. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. Local news cut into midday programming to play it. National outlets picked it up within the hour. The hashtags roared back to the top of trending. Hashtag watch this, hashtag they always do, and hashtag justice for Naomi. The reactions were immediate and visceral. Civil rights lawyers went on record calling the clip smoking gun evidence of racially motivated misconduct. Commentators on major networks played the video frame by frame, pointing to Curtis's body language, the casual cruelty in his tone. Protest turnout doubled overnight. At the Maison-Lure flagship, demonstrators held up large printed stills of Curtis's smirking face with the words "they always do" in bold red letters. The store's windows were papered with hastily taped corporate statements promising change. Inside, sales had slowed to a trickle. The few customers who did walk in were met with hushed whispers from staff and side eyes from protesters outside. By afternoon, the police department was feeling the heat. Reporters camped outside precinct doors, shoving microphones at anyone in uniform. Police Chief Daniel Price held a press conference, stiff in his Navy suit, trying to project authority. The video in question shows remarks made by a store employee, not a member of the police department, he said. However, we are reviewing the actions of the responding officers to ensure proper procedure was followed. It was a non-answer, and the crowd knew it. Shouts came from the back. Why did your officers detain her without evidence? Do you believe she was racially profiled? Will the officers be disciplined? Price dodged each question, retreating behind the wall of ongoing investigation. That evening, Councilwoman Renee Harris called Naomi. That clip changes everything, she said. It's not just an accusation anymore. It's proof. I've already spoken to the city attorney about opening a formal inquiry into both Maison-Lure and the police department's handling of your arrest. Naomi felt a flicker of relief. What does that mean? It means subpoenas. It means internal communications get dragged into daylight. And it means this case can't be quietly settled without public oversight. Corporate headquarters at Maison-Lure was in panic mode. In an emergency boardroom meeting, the CEO slammed her palm against the table. I don't care what it costs. We end this before our stock tanks further. We issue a third apology. We announce a diversity task force. We throw money at a community program. And someone get Naomi Brooks in here for a meeting. Angela Ross spoke up cautiously. She's rejected 2 settlement offers already. She doesn't want money, she wants accountability. The CEO's voice went cold. Then make her want the money. Dig, find pressure points. I don't care if it's personal or professional, everyone has a breaking point. The next day, a new smear article appeared online, this time from a national outlet with a reputation for leaning into controversy. The headline read, "Who is Naomi Brooks? The woman behind the viral video has a complicated past." The piece recycled the vague workplace conflict from earlier, but added embellishments anonymous. Sources claiming Naomi was hostile in meetings, questioning her integrity. It was a hit piece, and it was coordinated. Keisha stormed into Naomi's apartment with her phone in hand. "This is garbage. We're not letting them write your story." Naomi nodded grimly. "Then we write it ourselves." They spent the next 2 hours drafting a detailed rebuttal facts, timelines, statements from former colleagues who vouched for Naomi's professionalism. David reviewed it, tightening the legal language, then they posted it under Naomi's own name. The response was overwhelming. The same people who had been quick to doubt were now furious at the obvious smear attempt. The backlash turned on the outlet, with advertisers pulling campaigns and readers canceling subscriptions. Meanwhile, the protests were becoming more organized. Community leaders coordinated with activist groups to set up speaking schedules, fundraising for legal costs, and food stations for demonstrators. Naomi attended one of the largest rallies yet. Standing on a makeshift stage outside the flagship store, she looked out over a sea of signs and faces. Some chanted her name. Others held photos of family members who had endured similar treatment. When she took the mic, the crowd quieted. "I'm not here today just because of what happened to me," she began. "I'm here because of what's happened to too many people for too long. This isn't about one store or one manager. It's about a system that lets people in power decide who belongs and who doesn't. And I'm telling you now, we all belong." The roar that followed was deafening. That night, Naomi received another anonymous email. This one contained internal police memos. One in particular stood out. A report filed after her arrest that included a line stating, "No evidence of theft recovered from suspect at time of detainment." Detainment initiated based on store manager's verbal assertion. It was the police admitting in writing that they had nothing. Naomi forwarded the memo to David. He called her within minutes. "This is it," he said. "We pair this with the Curtis video, and we file a joint civil rights lawsuit against both Mason Lure and the police department. It's not just about damages, it's about forcing policy change." Naomi stared at the document on her screen, feeling the weight of it. Then let's do it. The next morning, Naomi and David held their own press conference. Cameras lined the steps of the courthouse as David laid out the case. Racial profiling by Mason Lure, supported by a history of complaints. Premeditated targeting, proven by the Curtis Dalton video. Police detainment without evidence, admitted in internal documentation. Naomi stood beside him, the marble columns of the courthouse framing her silhouette. When it was her turn to speak, she didn't read from notes. "I didn't ask to be here. But if I'm here, I'm going to use this moment to make sure no one else has to live it. This lawsuit isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's been told they don't belong, and everyone who's been punished for standing their ground. We're not just demanding justice. We're demanding change." The applause wasn't just from activists this time. Even some reporters joined in. As Naomi walked back inside with David, Kaisha caught her arm. "You just turned this from a fight into a movement." Naomi didn't smile, but there was a light in her eyes. "Good, because I'm not done yet." By the second week after filing the lawsuit, Naomi's life had been divided into two realities. In one, she was the face of a national movement. Supporters stopped her in coffee shops to thank her. Strangers sent flowers to her apartment. Activist groups invited her to speak, calling her a symbol of resilience. In the other, she was a target. Hateful messages poured into her inbox, daily emails, social media DMs, even letters slid under her apartment door. Some were thinly veiled threats. Others were blunt, dripping with racist slurs and bile. Naomi had started a folder on her phone labeled evidence to send them all to David. She tried not to read them more than once. Her sleep was fractured. She would wake at 3 a.m. replaying Curtis Dalton's smirk, Officer Kent's flat eyes, the heavy click of handcuffs on her wrists. Preparation for the case was relentless. David's office became a war room whiteboards covered in timelines, names, and connections. Copies of the internal emails and police memos were tacked to the wall alongside printouts of public statements. "You're going to have to testify," David told her one afternoon, tapping the board. "Under oath. They'll try to rattle you. The store's legal team will imply you were aggressive. The police attorneys will suggest you overreacted." Naomi leaned back in her chair. "Overreacted to being arrested in public for nothing? They're not here to argue truth," David said evenly. "They're here to plant doubt. And if they can get even one juror to see you as emotional or unreasonable, they've done their job." Kaisha, sitting on the edge of David's desk, crossed her arms. "So basically they'll try to put her on trial instead of themselves." "Exactly," David said. The pushback escalated the following week. An article appeared in a high-circulation magazine with a slick, sympathetic profile of Curtis Dalton. The headline read, The man behind the scandal speaks out. In it, Curtis claimed he was devastated by the incident, insisting that Naomi's behavior fit the profile of known shoplifters. He framed his "they always do" remark as a poorly worded joke, taken out of context. The piece painted him as a family man whose career had been destroyed overnight by a social media mob. The comments section was a battlefield. Supporters of Naomi called the article propaganda. Critics doubled down on their suspicion of her. Naomi felt her chest tighten as she scrolled. "They're rehabilitating him," she said to Kaisha, who was reading over her shoulder. "They're trying to turn him into the victim." "They can try," Kaisha said, "but the receipts don't lie. You have the footage, the emails, the memo. People know the truth." But the most personal blow came 3 days later. A conservative talk show host devoted an entire segment to Naomi, digging into her family background. He revealed her mother's home address on air, claiming people deserve to know who's behind this so-called movement. Within hours, someone had sent Naomi a photo of her mother's house. No note, no threat, just the image. Naomi's hand shook as she called her mother. "Baby, I'm fine," her mother insisted. "Your Uncle Ray is staying here for a few days. Don't you worry about me." But Naomi did worry. She had been prepared to take the hits herself, but dragging her family into it was a line she hadn't expected them to cross so soon. That night, David and Kaisha came over. "We're filing a restraining order against anyone making threats or harassment," David said firmly. "And I've already contacted the police about the doxing." Naomi almost laughed. "The same police department we're suing?" David's jaw tightened. "I know. But we still use the system to protect you where we can. And we'll make it public, let everyone see that their supporters are resorting to intimidation." Kaisha put a hand on Naomi's shoulder. "You're not alone in this. They want you to feel like you are. That's part of their play." Naomi nodded, but the knot in her stomach didn't loosen. The day of Naomi's deposition arrived with a cold rain that soaked the courthouse steps. She walked in wearing a navy blazer and crisp white blouse, her posture upright despite the heaviness in her chest. David flanked her on one side, Kaisha on the other. Inside, the conference room was crowded with lawyers, 2 for the store, 2 for the police department, and a court reporter tapping keys with quiet precision. They began with the store's attorney, a tall man with a polished smile and sharp eyes. "Miss Brooks, can you describe your demeanor upon entering Maison Lure that day?" "Calm," Naomi said. "I walked to the scarf section." "Would you say you were browsing aimlessly?" "No. I asked about a specific item." "And when the manager approached you, you refused a bag search?" "Yes, because I had done nothing to warrant it." The questions grew more pointed. They asked about her tone, her body language, whether she had raised her voice. They asked if she had any history of shoplifting. David immediately objected, but the seed was planted. Then the police attorneys took over, framing every action the officers took as standard procedure. They pressed her on why she hadn't simply complied with the search. "Because my dignity isn't optional," Naomi said, her voice firm. By the end of the deposition, Naomi was drained. The attorneys had tried every angle to twist her actions into something confrontational, but she had stayed steady, remembering David's advice. Answer simply, stick to the facts, never give them more than the question required. As they left the building, Kaisha looped an arm through hers. "You held your own." "They didn't break you." Naomi managed a tired smile. "They're not done trying." That evening, a new development hit the news cycle. A whistleblower from within Maison Lure's corporate office had come forward, publicly, revealing that executives had discussed planting a private investigator to monitor Ms. Brooks' activities for potential legal leverage. The whistleblower, a mid-level HR employee, told reporters they weren't looking for the truth. They were looking for dirt. The revelation reignited outrage, trending within hours. The hashtags returned, this time with a sharper edge. Hashtag stop targeting Naomi. Hashtag corporate harassment. Hashtag justice for Naomi. In the midst of the storm, Naomi received another call from Councilwoman Harris. "I know you're under pressure," Harris said. But I want you to know you've got allies. I'm introducing a city ordinance next week that would require retail stores to log all incidents of alleged theft, along with demographic data, and make it public annually. Your case is the catalyst." Naomi's throat tightened. "That's incredible. But it's not just me. This is for everyone who's been through it." "Exactly," Harris said. "And that's why we have to keep going, no matter what they throw at you." That night, Naomi sat on her couch with the TV muted, scrolling through messages. Between the hate and the threats, there were messages that kept her going. "I showed your video to my daughter. She said it made her feel less alone. I've been through this before. Seeing you fight gives me hope. Don't stop. We need you." She thought of the marble floors of Maison Lure, the cold weight of handcuffs, the way Curtis had looked at her like she was already guilty. She thought of the emails, the leaked memo, the video of him smirking. And she thought of the people who had reached out, not just for her, but for themselves. Naomi realized something then. This fight wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. It was about making it impossible for anyone else's name to be dragged through the same mud without consequence. Her jaw set. They wanted to break her. Instead, they were making her stronger. The trial began on a Monday morning under a sky the color of steel. Naomi stood on the courthouse steps, flanked by David on her right and Kaisha on her left, the hum of reporters and supporters buzzing around them. The building's marble columns loomed ahead, austere and unyielding, but Naomi no longer felt small in their shadow. Inside, the courtroom was a study in contrasts, the polished wood of the judge's bench, the sharp suits of the attorneys, and the sea of faces in the gallery: activists, journalists, curious onlookers, and more than a few Maison Lure employees who had come to see the outcome for themselves. Curtis Dalton sat at the defense table with the store's legal team, his expression tight, jaw working as if grinding invisible teeth. The police department's representatives sat at a separate table, their attorneys flipping through neat stacks of paperwork. Naomi took her seat, spine straight, heart steady. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind too many times to count. David opened with a statement that cut like glass. "This is a case about dignity," he told the jury. "About what happens when a black woman walks into a luxury store and is treated not as a customer, but as a suspect. It's about a store manager with a documented history of profiling, a police department that acted on his word without evidence, and the systemic biases that allow both to operate without accountability until now." The defense attorneys countered with polished, controlled tones, framing Curtis as vigilant and the officers as following standard procedure. But David had already set the frame. This was about bias and abuse of authority, not retail security or police protocol. Naomi was called to the stand on the second day. She took the oath, hands steady, despite the dozens of eyes fixed on her. David guided her through her testimony. She told the jury about walking into Maison Lure to buy a gift for her mother, about the sales associate's pointed tone, about Curtis's demand to search her bag. She described refusing the search, the arrival of the police, and the humiliation of being cuffed in front of strangers. When David played the Curtis video, the grainy clip of him smirking and saying, "Watch this, she's going to make this easy." They always do. The courtroom was silent except for the faint hum of the speakers. Naomi watched the jurors' faces as the words landed. Some frowned. One shook their heads slightly. Then came the internal emails. The jurors read them in silence. 3 previous complaints against Curtis, corporate's decision to keep him, and the executive directive to stall and hope the noise dies down. Finally, the police memo appeared on the overhead screen. No evidence of theft recovered. Detainment initiated based on store manager's verbal assertion. Naomi didn't need to add much. The documents spoke for themselves. Then it was the defense's turn. The store's attorney tried to chip at her credibility, suggesting she had been combative and could have avoided the situation entirely by consenting to the bag search. Naomi met his gaze and replied evenly, "My innocence doesn't require me to surrender my rights." The police attorney pressed her on whether she'd raised her voice. "I spoke loudly enough for people to hear me," Naomi said. because in that moment the truth was all I had to protect me. Neither line of questioning rattled her. She stuck to the facts, refusing to be baited into anger. The jury also heard from the whistleblower HR employee who testified about the corporate discussions to protect Curtis and the plan to dig into Naomi's personal life for leverage. The room shifted palpably when the whistleblower said they weren't trying to find the truth, they were trying to bury it. Officer Lewis, the younger black officer who had quietly told Naomi to check the internet tomorrow, testified under subpoena. He admitted to leaking the footage, saying, "I couldn't watch another innocent person be humiliated without doing something." It was a moment of quiet courage that rippled through the courtroom. Closing arguments came at the end of the second week. David stood before the jury, his voice low but firm. "This case is about a choice, Curtis Dalton's choice to target my client, Mason Lure's choice to protect him, and the police department's choice to arrest without cause. Each choice was built on the same foundation, the assumption that a black woman in a luxury store must be guilty of something. The law says otherwise. Justice says otherwise. And now you must say otherwise." The defense warned the jury against punishing businesses for protecting their property and second-guessing police officers in the field. But their words felt thin against the mountain of evidence. The jury deliberated for a day and a half. Naomi spent the time pacing her apartment, phone in hand, unable to focus on anything else. Kaisha stayed with her, forcing her to eat, distracting her with old movies, but the tension never left the room. On the afternoon of the second day, David called. "They have a verdict." The courtroom was packed when they returned. Naomi sat between David and Kaisha, hands clasped in her lap. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable. The foreperson stood. "In the matter of Brooks versus Mason Lure and the City of Brookhaven Police Department, we find in favor of the plaintiff." Naomi exhaled, barely hearing the rest. Damages awarded against both defendants, punitive damages against Mason Lure for willful misconduct, and a directive for the police department to implement mandatory bias training and review their detainment protocols. In the gallery, a ripple of cheers broke out before the judge's gavel restored order. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes, but she held them back. She had promised herself she would stand strong to the very end. Outside the courthouse, the air was electric. Supporters waved signs, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. Naomi stepped to the microphones. "This victory isn't just mine, it's ours," she said, voice steady. "It belongs to every person who's been followed in a store for no reason, to every person who's been told their dignity is negotiable. Today the jury said it isn't. Today they said we belong everywhere." The crowd erupted. Kaisha hugged her, David shook her hand, and Councilwoman Harris stepped forward to announce the next step. "With this verdict, we're moving forward with legislation to hold retailers accountable for discrimination and to ensure police departments cannot detain without evidence. Naomi's fight is changing this city." Over the following weeks, change began to take root. Mason Lure's CEO issued a public apology, not the corporate scripted kind, but one read aloud at a press conference, acknowledging systemic failures and promising reforms. Curtis Dalton was barred from working in retail management anywhere in the state. The police department rolled out new detainment policies, requiring corroborating evidence before making an arrest on a store's word alone. Bias training became mandatory, and Naomi? She kept speaking. She joined panels on racial equity, partnered with advocacy groups, and helped create a nonprofit to provide legal aid for victims of profiling. The name of the nonprofit, We Belong, came from the words she'd spoken at that rally weeks before. One evening, months later, Naomi walked past the Mason Lure flagship. The marble floors were still there, the gold fixtures still gleaming. But there was a small placard near the entrance now. "This location participates in the We Belong Anti-Bias Initiative, dedicated to ensuring every customer is treated with dignity and respect." She stopped, looking at her reflection in the glass. It had cost her sleepless nights, relentless attacks, and the dragging of her name through mud. But standing there, she knew it had been worth it. not just for her, but for everyone who would walk through those doors in the future without fear of being treated as less. Naomi took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and kept walking. She had more work to do,